everyone, and welcome back to the Owl Pod, the official podcast of Temple Athletics. I'm your host, Kevin Copp, and our guest today is an associate professor in Temple's School of Sport, Tourism, and Hospitality Management, and our faculty athletics representative, Dr. Elizabeth Taylor. Dr. Taylor joined STHM in 2017 upon the completion of her doctoral studies at the University of Tennessee. Her work has broadly centered on organizational culture and well-being within the sport industry, specifically as it relates to sport employees and athletes. She has an extensive background in college athletics as both a player and a coach. She received a master's of kinesiology and health with an emphasis in sports psychology from Miami University, that's the one in Ohio, where she was also an assistant volleyball coach, and her Bachelor of Science in Business Administration is from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, where she played volleyball and ran track. This is a great conversation about college athletics and just the state of the world today in 2025. Here is Elizabeth Taylor after this quick word from our Alpod sponsors.
And we're back with the action. Coke Zero Sugar might be the best Coke ever.
That's right, Jim. With an irresistible taste and zero sugar, Coke Zero Sugar is a must-try for any sports fan. So make sure you... Wait, Jim, I didn't mean try it right now. We're still on the air.
Best Coke ever? Take a taste, Jen.
Really?
No, not right now, Jen. We got a game to call.
And admittedly, now I'm panicking a little bit about classes starting next week, but it's fine.
Well, this is just what you need, like an hour in the middle of a Tuesday to get nothing done. So this is perfect timing.
It's a welcome break because it's like you can only I can only sit in course prep for so long, right? Like I get to a point where I'm like, I can't link any more articles into Canvas. My eyes are burning. Like I need something a little more stimulating than
Hopefully this is that. I guess I've liked to start with everyone's childhood. It's at least with the bios that I've been able to find, and you kind of pick up with University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. Are you from Wisconsin originally? How do you find yourself to UW-Stevens Point as a two-sport athlete?
Yeah. So originally from Wisconsin, moved around quite a bit as a kid for my dad's job and got started in sport in ballet, actually. Hated every second of it. My mom had to try to bribe me to go. And then they asked me to not come back. And suggested I try gymnastics. So that was kind of my first taste of sport. But yeah, originally from small town Wisconsin. Whenever I describe it to people in Philly, I say people at my high school drove tractors to school. So if you're thinking about like on a scale of 1 to small town, driving tractors to school is
That's
where
pretty
I'm
much,
from.
yeah. It's all the way in one direction. So you make your way from ballet to gymnastics. At what point did track and volleyball at what point did you think, okay, this is something, not only am I going to pursue as a hobby, but, it could be a path toward college as well?
Yeah. So I actually thought that I was going to do gymnastics in college. So I started gymnastics and that was my, I would say, primary sport. I was exposed to volleyball and track in 7th grade. I also played softball and my dad was a college hockey coach. So I spent a lot of time at the rink, a lot of time on the ice. But never really fell in love with that. But so I got exposed to volleyball and track and absolutely loved all of it. I loved anything and everything to do with sports, loved watching it, loved playing it. Played all 3 sports in high school. So volleyball in the fall, gymnastics in the winter, track in the spring, and then softball over the summer. And my sophomore year, I had to have wrist surgery. And so I was sidelined for a gymnastics season. And after that, I just was never really the same, just never could kind of get back to the level where I was. So decided that I wanted to continue playing in college and would have to go the route of volleyball or track, and ended up being really lucky that I went to a Division III school where I could do both. And I also coached high school gymnastics while I was there, so kind of got to keep my feet wet in that way as well.
I feel like we are from the last generation, it feels like, of being able to have that experience in sports, right? It seems so foreign now, as we'll get to, that nobody, and now growing up with a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old who are starting youth sport, I mean, it's insane now compared to, again, what you had in terms of like a well-rounded, well-balanced, seemingly very healthy relationship with getting to play
Yeah.
all these different sports growing up. Like that's out the window now.
Yeah, so I did volleyball and track through school, middle school and then high school. And when I was in high school, there were some club volleyball teams and in and around like the Milwaukee area, they had the Milwaukee Track Club, but where I was, it was just really there weren't those opportunities. Like I said, when I got to high school, they started to have some more club volleyball, but it's not like what it looks like today. And there, I mean, just thinking about financial resources, like we didn't have the financial resources to pay the amount of money that it costs to play youth sport and club sport today. So yeah, I when I talk about my childhood and even my college experience, I had such a holistic experience. I was a true student athlete, and that is something that I do not take that for granted a single day because the pressures that exist for college athletes today are they are incredible.
Now, not to flash too far ahead, but you end up getting your master's, getting your doctorate as well. Did you always have kind of the idea in mind that you were going the academia route, or did that come later on?
Yeah, so I got to my senior year, played my last volleyball game and kind of had this like uh-oh moment. Like I had no idea what I wanted to do. My undergrad degree was in business, but admittedly I was the same amount of credits towards a business degree or a psychology degree. So I played eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I was like, we're gonna pick one, we're gonna go with it. Very grateful. Loved my time at the Century School at UWSP, but had really no idea what I wanted to do. And so I started exploring graduate schools and two coaches at UWSP, the men's hockey coach and the baseball coach, played at UWSP, went to Miami, got their master's in sports psychology, and came back and coached at UWSP. And so I was like, I'm going to be the third one to do that. I'm going to go and I'm going to get my master's and I'm going to come back and coach. And I applied to one graduate school. I did not apply to a single job. I put all of my eggs in that basket. My parents were like, if you don't get a graduate assistant position, get ready to take out some loans because you will be done with undergrad and we are done with you. And so I got really lucky and I got a graduate assistant position at Miami. And I will say this, the real Miami, the one that's in
I was
Ohio,
going to
that
say
was
this
a
is an important
university.
this is an important
This is
distinction.
so
Yes.
important. Yes. Miami was a university before Florida was a state. So I feel very passionate about Miami University. So I went there. I spent 2 years as a graduate assistant volleyball coach. And I also was so the graduate assistant volleyball coach was unpaid. My actual graduate assistant position was teaching classes. So I served as a teaching assistant and then also taught lab classes in the kinesiology and health department. And I did physical activity courses and kind of just got an array of experiences in the classroom and really fell in love with teaching. And then I also started working with a faculty member. Her name is Dr. Rosemary Ward. I still work very closely with her today, and she afforded me the opportunity to engage in research and just really exposed me to what research was and demystified the idea that research is, petri dishes and white lab coats and that sort of thing. And I really fell in love with teaching and with research. And I love playing volleyball. If I could do one thing for the rest of my life, every day I would play volleyball. I'm not nearly good enough to do that, so I settle for being a faculty member. But I didn't love coaching. It wasn't. It just. I think. The Miami is in the max, so we would drive to Buffalo, New York, right? And the 7 days a week of being there for practice and then rehab and training tables and all of that. It just was. It's a lifestyle that I wasn't exposed to as a D3 athlete. Again, had a very holistic experience, always had an on-campus job, right? Did an internship, like track and volleyball were things I did, but they were not my life. And so at the D1 level, I saw that really was life. And I knew that I wanted a family, I wanted kids, I wanted those things. And so when I saw the opportunity to do a PhD in sport management, I was like, let's go on for a couple more years of school because I've already been here for 6. So what's, 4 more? What's that gonna do? So had no idea. I actually have this like very vivid memory. My first semester. Sitting on the floor with one of our assistant coaches, waiting for practice to start. And she was asking just about, the classes, how are they going? And I was just like going on and on, just rambling so passionately about this research methods course that I was in. And she was like, "You're going to get a PhD one day." And I was like, "Never. No, I will be done with school after this semester or this program. No, I will not." So yeah, I think I didn't even really understand how to become a faculty member. Obviously, I had them, right? But like,
Sure. You
I
don't really think
didn't.
about, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So no, I had no. My plan was to be a college volleyball coach. I was all in on that, and didn't know this was a possibility until I got to Miami and started doing the research and the teaching and that sort of thing.
So you get your PhD at Tennessee, which I, as a Georgia grad, will forgive you for. We'll sidestep that part of our relationship. But you come here to Temple in 2017, is that right?
Yep. Yeah.
So
So straight out of PhD.
with obviously kind of upper Midwestern background, same more or less through your master's, Tennessee, somewhat Southern but also Midwestern flavor to it. How Philadelphia? Why Philadelphia? What was that transition like for you?
Yeah. Yeah, so I had never been to Philly before I came on my interview. I had no honestly, I had no perception of what it, I had been to New York and understood that it was a big East Coast city, but really had limited experience in a space like this. Knoxville's a little bit bigger than, Stevens Point and where I grew up and Oxford, Ohio, but still very much a college town, very southern. Things are very slow. People drive under the speed limit. Nobody's in a hurry. So coming to Philly was like a wild experience, I think. Just coming to a place where everything is so fast paced, people are so honest. I love it. It's really been I think it has to be a quick transition, right? Like you don't get to take time to get acclimated, right?
Right.
Because they don't like people don't care. They're gonna honk at you whether or not you're from Philly or you're just visiting. So um yeah, it was a new experience for me being in just such a large metropolitan area. Obviously, I had the Division 1 experience at Miami and then again at Tennessee, but just the big city feel was something that I had never experienced before. I loved the urban campus. That was something that was totally new to me. So yeah, it was an opportunity that I really couldn't pass up as I was applying and interviewing for jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine having never been here before and coming here. I mean, so I grew up here. I grew up in King of Prussia, go to school at the University of Georgia. I spent 9 years in Athens, and then coming back here when I came back in 2015, I'm like, I lost all of that muscle memory. I was like, oh my gosh, was everyone always this mean and this frantic here? I feel like I've just gotten my legs back underneath me after, so I can't imagine, spending your whole life elsewhere and having to dive in that late in life.
Yeah, yeah. So my parents moved out here about 3.5 years ago when our daughter was born, and so I mean, I grew up in small town Wisconsin. My mom grew up in like even smaller town Wisconsin. When we go there, I tell people like I know people say they don't have cell phone service, and that usually is a lie. But like I will not have cell phone service.
Wow.
Like it is so small town, and they've been here for 3.5 years, and she still will not drive in the city. She still gets anxious when we're trying to go into Center City or do something like that. So yeah, I love it. But it takes a little bit to get used to, and it's definitely an acquired taste, if you will. But yeah, it's just been a great 8.5 years for us here.
Well, I'm sure you see it with the students too. The students that love it here love it here. And I always get asked now, because I've been here for 10 years, I have family that is coming. I have a niece that's here now that's a sophomore. And so I always get asked, like, would you go there or would you send your daughter? And I was like, I went to the University of Georgia. I went to a huge land grant Southern school, totally different vibe. But the people that come here love it here. And I love it here from having worked here like you close to a decade now. And yeah, I think it's you either get it or you don't. And so it's
Totally.
it's nice that it's worked out. So I want to talk about a couple of the different planks that you've had in your time here at Temple. Obviously, one of them is just kind of the quote unquote traditional professor aspect of what you do, but there's also a research component, and then there's also your direct tie with Temple Athletics. And I think fans that are listening to this podcast are probably most interested in that segment. You become the faculty athletics representative in 2024. So we'll circle back around to, because I think it all ties together into the research and the things you've been studying. But tell me about how that position comes about, the process of that, and just for folks that may not even know what a faculty athletics rep is, and kind of that additional responsibility that you've taken on among everything else you've got going on.
Yeah. Yeah. The faculty athletics rep it's a really, I would say, unique aspect of college athletics. So it is a role that's required by the NCAA. So every institution has to have a faculty athletics rep. Some have two. Sometimes there's a faculty athletics rep for men's athletics and women's. We have a combined position here at Temple. So what my primary duty is to serve as a liaison between, I call it Big Temple T, and the athletic department. So I meet with student athletes a lot to talk about coursework and thinking about graduate school and thinking about, maybe there's a faculty member who isn't super supportive of them missing class to go to competitions, or that sort of thing. So I kind of liaise those relationships. I meet with faculty senate. We have a group of faculty, they're called the faculty athletics, or faculty student athlete mentoring committee, and it's one faculty member from each school and college, and we meet several times a semester just to talk about what's happening on campus. What are they seeing, not just from a student athlete perspective, but across the student body. So something we talk about a lot is like the use of AI in the classroom, and how do they manage the use of AI, and what are their course policies, and what can the athletic department do, specifically thinking about the Resnick Center and Tara and her staff. How can they support student athletes as they navigate what is somewhat of there isn't a university policy, so they might have three different policies in the courses that they're taking, and what's allowed, what's not allowed. So trying to ensure that we set our students up to be successful people in life, thinking about their experiences off the court, outside the weight room, and even outside of the classroom as well. So we talk a lot about research opportunities and graduate school fellowships and that sort of thing. So then I'll also meet with faculty if they're maybe having, maybe they've had some issues with several student athletes, or, trying to just create relationships so we can have open conversations about the things that are happening in the classroom, in the athletic department. A large piece of it is student athlete well-being. So thinking about what sort of holistic development do we provide? How do we support student athlete mental health? I think we're really lucky here at Temple. We have a great team in all of those areas. Prince, it does a wonderful job in student athlete development. Dr. Coakley and her team in TU. Well, the resources we have here at Temple they're really top notch, and something that not a lot of institutions, even in our conference, have multiple full-time mental health consultants or counselors. So I feel grateful to have such an amazing team that I work with. But that's, I would say, kind of the nuts and bolts of what I do. I work really closely with Christy on compliance. I work really closely with Tara and the Resnick Center staff. Obviously, really closely with Arthur and President Fry. So lots of moving pieces, but I have been welcomed with open arms and access to everything, which makes my job a lot easier. That's not the case everywhere. I remember talking to Christy early on after the first NCAA convention that I went to, and I was like, tell me, am I naive, or like, are we running a pretty tight ship here? Like, we know what's going on, our coaches are great, our staff is great. And she was like, oh yeah, no, these things that are happening at other institutions, that's not happening here. We're keeping better tabs on, everything that's going on. So my experience in this role has been really incredible.
It's interesting to hear because you don't know until something like that, where you're in a convention setting or you get the chance to. I'm sure now, especially within the American, you've developed relationships with your colleagues. But I think it's really interesting because it's a topic that comes up a lot in the course of having this podcast. Is just kind of college athletics as it should be, and I try not to be kind of the old man, waving his fist at the clouds. But in a way, that is college athletics kind of as we knew it, as we came up in the world, and you came up as a student athlete, I came up as an employee and an administrator. But I think it is refreshing to know that it's not the thing that grabs the headlines, unfortunately, but that this work is being done behind the scenes, because so much of what is in the news now is all of the stuff that is not the intersection of athletics and academics. It's everything about the NIL and transfer portal and all those things. So I think it is refreshing just for a fan of college sports to know, but particularly if you're a Temple fan, to know that there are still some safeguards and there are still people that are really trying to put their best foot forward to preserve, as you've called it, the holistic experience of being a student athlete.
Yeah. And I think sometimes I teach our college athletics course. So obviously I openly criticize a number of things that are happening in college athletics, right? And just from let's have a critical look at what's happening. I'm not saying what's happening is right or what's wrong, but let's just look at it. And one thing that one beef I have, if you will, with the NCAA is the way that they put these positions in place. So whether it's the faculty athletic rep or the senior woman administrator, right? And they say you have to have these, but beyond that, there's not much in terms of this is what it should look like. So what my position looks completely different than every other FAR in the American, which is a really interesting thing to think about, because the basic principles of what we're doing, supporting student athlete development and ensuring institutional control, those are really the pillars of what we're doing. But the way that it looks in every experience is different. And I meet once a semester with President Fry. I meet monthly with Arthur. I have a lot of access, and there are other FARs who will say, "I've never met with our president before," or our athletic director maybe knows who I am if I'm wearing a name tag and we're both at the same event, and it's pretty small, right? So that is, again, just to the credit of the folks here. They are really passionate about the student athlete experience and just ensuring that we're setting our student athletes up not just for success on the field, on the court, in the classroom, but for life when they leave here. Because that's, at the end of the day, this is 4 to 5 years of their life, and there's so much beyond this. And so I feel really lucky to be a part of something like that.
I think that is an important point, because you're not imbued with any kind of independent, as you said. There is no authority within the position other than just what you're going to get. And so if you have an athletic director that's not going to be cooperative, or you have a president that's not going to support you, it's just going to be window dressing, and it's not going to work. And so I think to that end, you mentioned President Fry. Obviously, your position as far predates that presidential transition. But what has been your experience just in kind of, I know that he is well versed in some of these, hot topics that are in and around college athletics. Just what has your assessment been of just kind of how he sees that role within, Temple's portfolio overall?
Yeah. Yeah. I think he really understands the big picture of how athletics fits in to the larger university, and what that looks like for us specifically at Temple. And so I've really been pleasantly surprised how engaged he is. When we talk about things, I'm never sharing new information with him. He's always like, yep, that email came through me too. I talked about that with Arthur, or, I'm not catching him by surprise with the things that I'm telling him, which leads me to believe that he's going to games. He's engaged in conversations with folks across the athletic department. He's listening, he's asking questions in a way that, again, tells me that he's very interested in the holistic experience, as he would be with any student on Temple's campus, right? He's not looking at our student athletes as a potential moneymaker. He's not looking at them, any other way than just to say, this is a student on our campus, and we have to help them grow and develop and challenge them to become, better people and more educated people and that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, really seeing them for the people who they are, and appreciating the experiences that they have as student athletes. And it's clear that he and Arthur have a great working relationship as well. I know they, communicate on a very regular basis, which is not always the case at institutions.
Well, and I think this is also helpful to note, and again, kind of counteracts some of the stereotypes or narratives that are out there. And you were aware of this clearly when you took over the position in 2024 because you had been here for all of it. But if you look at the track record of Temple student athletes academically, it is incredibly good. It's been an incredible. I don't have the numbers offhand, but I know the fall data either just came out or is just about to come out. It's another, 3.4 something cumulative GPA, and I mean I think it makes things easier, right, for everyone involved, for you, for the president, for Arthur, when you have a demonstrated track record of, hey, it's not that our student athletes are just coming to compete and they're blowing off classwork and, they're doing the bare minimum to get by. Like, it's a high-functioning, high-achieving academic group as well as everything that they're doing on the field and on the court.
Yeah, it's incredible, honestly. So 2 years ago, Reed, one of our academic advisors, and Professor Scott Gradston, who works in the Klein College of Media and Communication, organized a student athlete showcase, student athlete academic showcase. So it's a whole day dedicated to our student athletes presenting the research that they're engaging in and sitting on panels to tell folks more about what it's like to be, a student athlete and to do research and have all these experiences as, entrepreneurs and that sort of thing. And the first year that I went, I know I'm not the smartest person in the whole world. I do have a PhD, but it's in sport, right? Like it's not rocket science. What we're doing is not rocket science. So I'm sitting here looking at these posters and I'm like, man, I also have a master's in statistics and I can't, this is so over my head. And these are, they're undergraduate students, they're Division I college athletes. Like I'm continuously blown away at the work that our student athletes are doing. And again, I think there's a lot of places where the student aspect of student athletes takes a back seat, but that's not what's happening here. Our student athletes are going out and they're winning, national awards and high-level fellowships and getting into med school and PT school and OT school. And those, I think, are things that, again, just illustrate how dedicated the staff is, the coaching staff, the support staff, to creating those holistic opportunities for them and allowing, alterations to practice schedules, training schedules, that sort of thing to accommodate the work that they want to do, which, that was something that I was accustomed to as a Division III athlete at a smaller school. There was often just one section, of certain classes. And so if it ran into practice, it ran into practice and you made it up. But I see those sort of conversations happening here as how can we accommodate, this class or this want or this experience, because our student athletes they're just doing incredible things.
Yeah. And even if it's, we have student athletes that are student teaching, that are, going into nursing and have, clinical hours that they, it's not always necessarily research or something. It just, preparing for the kind of, real world jobs that require this, it's not easy to manage. And I think you're right. I think it's one of those kind of behind the scenes things that probably deserves more attention than it gets. So all of this, I think, dovetails really neatly with the research that you have done throughout your academic career, and I'm quoting directly now that it broadly centers on organizational culture and well-being within the sport industry. And in full disclosure, I think I'm allowed to say that I participated in one of these studies with one of your colleagues at Tennessee back in 2022, which was really interesting to get a view into the research side from the subject of research participant, which honestly felt more like therapy, talking about organizational well-being and it was a whole set of interviews with myself. My wife was interviewed. We had 2 young kids at the time, so talking about just work-life balance and all these really interesting things. But like you said, it's research that is not, test tubes and pipettes and things like that. But it's incredibly interesting. And so I know this would be an entirely broad topic in and of itself, but I'm just wondering if you could kind of share some of the, the research insight that you've been able to glean, because I think organizational culture for any organization right now is super interesting in 2025, but particularly in college athletics, it seems like a very fertile ground to be studying.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so from the most basic level, when people ask what sort of work I do, I say I do basically HR work, but on sport organizations. So I'm really interested in the employee experience from a perspective of work-life balance, burnout, engagement, overwork cultures, and candidly, a lot of my ideas come from my husband. My husband's a D3 associate head swim coach at Swarthmore College. He stays in touch with a lot of, he was previously at Tennessee, previously at Ohio State before that. So stays in touch with a lot of his friends who coach at the Power Five level and sees, some of the changes that have happened, the transfer portal, how that has impacted college athletics, NIL, right? And so a lot of my research questions come from just things he's experienced or things he says where I'm like, that's not actually your job, but like he thinks it is his job, right? So yeah, so a lot of what we have found is a lack of work-life balance, and it stems from I think a lot of things. The advances in technology, right? So now it's not email, but it's email on your phone, right? Or it's text messages or that sort of thing. So just this kind of need to be available 24/7, especially during certain times of the year, recruiting seasons, right? Postseason, preseason, that sort of thing. So just a lack of work-life balance. I think when COVID hit and the work from home mandates came into play, athletic departments were not prepared to do anything in a work from home manner, right? There was this huge idea of like we must be in the office, this kind of like we call it presenteeism.
Mm.
You had to do your work in the office. And some people they do have like you're not going to be able to do facilities from home. And I totally get that, right? If you work in facilities, if you work grounds, turf management, that sort of thing, those are really in-person jobs. But if you're working in areas where a lot of what you're doing is sending emails or completing forms, why can't I do that from my home office? Or why can't I do that from my couch? Or wherever it is you prefer to work, a coffee shop. So we did a study where we talked to folks during COVID, and that was one of the things that they said is like, we are so unprepared to work in this environment, and it really is hurting our productivity. It's really hurting our employee engagement. um, and so I was hopeful that we would learn from that. We would, create channels to better implement work from home opportunities for employees, because we know from other industries that hybrid schedules are incredibly desirable. You can be efficient and effective when you work from home. It's not just watching TV and eating snacks all day, like I think sometimes people think it is. But then, in this post-COVID setting, I think we've reverted back. I think a lot of places are not offering those opportunities. And that's something that I sound so old when I say this, but this next generation of employees wants. They want flexibility, they want work-life balance. We're hearing more and more from our students that their experience as an employee is more important to them than how much money they make. And I always laugh and say, well, that's great because you're not actually going to make any money either. So, like, I'm not sure, what you think, but so I worry that I talk about sport from a perspective like sport is sexy. That's kind of how I talk about it when people are like, you have a lot of majors, a lot of people are interested in sport management. And what we do is a lot of the same things that you do in the business world, but with sport, it's a little different. It's sexy. I worry that the novelty of that is starting to wear off as people understand the grind, if you will. That used to be like a badge of honor, right?
Yes.
When we were starting out in the industry and I was a graduate assistant, it was like, I've worked 36 days in a row without a day off, or, I worked this entire weekend and I have to be back in the office on Monday. I don't know that people are in that same mindset right now. So that is, I think, my worry and my challenge for specifically the college sport industry. That's kind of where my passions have been, and a lot of my research has been. I don't know that the professional sport industry is any better, but I think that's what a lot of research has been telling us, is that we continue to see what, some of the early research is from the early 2000s. We see the same issues with a lack of work-life balance, with high levels of burnout, low levels of pay. I think what I kind of continue to talk about with folks when I present on my research is just, this is my challenge to you. These are the things we know. You want to keep good people, we have to start making some changes. Now, with this new pay for play model, I don't know where the money comes from,
Right.
right? Because now we're talking about needing some places an extra $20.5 million to pay athletes. So where the money for employees comes from, I don't know. But that is one thing that I talk about a lot, is just, we know what works, and so let's start to make some changes to our organizational culture so we can keep our best and our brightest employees, because right now we're losing them once they get to a certain point.
Well, I'm sure you heard it as I did so many times when I was starting out in the industry, was there's a million people that are lined up ready to take your, if you don't want to work in sports, there's there's a stack of resumes a mile long of people that want to do this. And I mean, and that was true. It wasn't wrong. I was working at the University of Georgia. It was a, flagship institution
Yeah.
in a college sports rabid state. There probably were a million people lined up that would have done my job, and again, you do it for 9 months and you find out, hey, yeah, this isn't all the fun it's cracked up to be, but yeah, it's just a totally different composition of the workforce now is so different. The labor market is tighter than it was, post recession in 2008 when I was coming into the world. There's just so many different, really interesting sociological factors going on. So
Totally.
I'm sure that just continues to be fertile ground for
Yeah.
research. It's
Yeah.
something that's going to be timeless moving forward.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that it was kind of like therapy, because we do hear that a lot. Something that I am never, like, I think I will never not be surprised when I reach out to people, right? Like, we reach out to you and the other folks who participated, and we're like, would you talk to us? And also, would your partner talk to
Right.
us? Like, and people were just like, yes, absolutely. Like, I continue to just be shocked by the number of people who are like, yes, I'll tell you my story. Yes, I'll be real with you, the struggles. And one thing I think, I mean, we have found is that, the passion for sport is so high. So the people who are doing this, they understand they're not going to get rich, right? Especially the people outside of the coaching world. They're not doing it for the money. They're not doing it for the fame or the notoriety. They're doing it because they're passionate about supporting student athletes. They're passionate about helping, kids become adults and that sort of thing. So that is something that that hasn't changed. The fundamentals of why people are getting into the industry and what really keeps them through times that are really challenging and can be, very draining on people and their families, but the passion has always really been there. So that is something I think is a huge positive for the industry. But yeah, no shortcomings in terms of research topics in this area as we move forward, for sure.
It was interesting. Yeah, that experience. It was the first time, honestly, I spent a lot of time actually thinking about how I felt about a lot of it's so much of it you just take for granted because it's all I've ever known. I've only ever worked in college athletics. That's the only job I've ever had. So you just kind of, it was interesting to almost be forced to take a little bit of a step back and say, well, wait a minute. Yeah, why am I? It was just natural back in the day when we would get back from Starkville, Mississippi on a 6-hour bus ride that got you back at 2 a.m. Work started at 8 a.m. the next day. Like you were at your desk by 8
Yeah.
o'clock or you were getting a phone call. Yeah, why are we doing that?
Yeah.
Why? There's just so many things, that it opens up in a really interesting way. And so I guess, to bring it all kind of back together, you've had so many different perspectives: student athlete, coach, faculty athletics rep, professor, researcher. You have so many different viewpoints into this. are how do you feel right now? Do you feel optimistic about where we are or where we are potentially heading? I know there are a lot of pitfalls. I mean, what kind of gives you? You obviously have a passion for what you're doing, and just the amount of work that you do for Temple and for Temple athletics. So what kind of gives you hope amidst some of the craziness that we're all finding ourselves in right now?
Yeah. Yeah, the experiences that I had, I mean, I am here because of my experiences as a student athlete. They set me up for success. I learned so many valuable life lessons as a student athlete. I think back to, so my husband and I met in undergrad. We got married on our college campus. Majority of our wedding party were athletes with us. The photographer who did our pictures was a woman who I played volleyball with. Like, just so much of our life is really built in our experiences of as student athletes, and what we do today. I still draw on so many of those things. So I think I have to be optimistic because it just was such a huge part of my life, and I see it is admittedly, I think, a crossroads of a number of different things that could happen. I don't believe that the Power Four institutions are going to break away. I think it's too much work to create a whole new entity to govern probably just college football, right? I think they already have enough decision-making power. So I'm not an extremist in that way, but there are things that I think are really positive, and something I'm very passionate about is the experiences of women athletes, and just seeing the way that women athletes have been able to be successful in NIL deals, and creating those sorts of opportunities for themselves is something that I think has been so great that has come out of this. I think about, I mean, obviously, I played Division 3 volleyball, but followed Division 1. So thinking about Penn State women's volleyball, Wisconsin women's volleyball, right? Like all of the Nebraska, as much as it pains me to say that, Nebraska women's volleyball, just the success that they've had, and the way that they have changed what it means to be a woman athlete, and thinking about the growth in the women's basketball national championship following Sedona Prince's viral was it TikTok or Instagram reel where she kind of broke the story of what their weight room looked like versus at the men's NCAA championship. So I think that these opportunities have been incredible for women athletes, and that's something that I think I really continue to look at and to think about, is just how can we find positives in all the craziness that is happening, right? I think the transfer portal has been great for agency of our student athletes, but has so many challenges when you're thinking about how do you graduate from an institution when you've been at 4 institutions in 4 years, and are we making decisions because it's what's best for us from an academic standpoint, or where we promise something and we get there and we find out we are not actually getting what we're promised. Again, I think so much is really happening right now, but I am excited about the future, and what it looks like in terms of college athletics and the opportunities to participate in college athletics. So I'm hopeful, cautiously optimistic, if you will. But I think the important thing for folks to understand is, who their institution is. It's one thing I love about Arthur and the folks in Temple's athletic department. I feel like we know who we are and what we're trying to do and who we're trying to be, and we're not trying to be something that we're not. And we understand that the experience for our student athletes is so much more than just on the field, because we don't have the same amount of money as a Georgia or a Tennessee or other institutions in the Power Four. So to me, that's kind of the key to success for athletic departments, is to know who they are and to be able to navigate that space without trying to keep up with the Joneses, if you will, because I think that's when you really get yourself into trouble.
Oh, I am grateful for your insight, because I do think it gives a dose of perspective that sometimes when you get too much in the weeds thinking about everything that's in the newspapers right now can paint a pretty rough picture of where things are. So it's a nice reminder of, I think, why most of us got into this and are not working in professional sports and are working in college sports. So it's still there. I think that's what I tell people. There is still a heart to it all. And since I know your research will continue to develop and evolve, we'll have to have you back on and kind of check in from time to time and see how things are going. But I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was great.
All right, that's this week's episode of the Owl Pod. I want to thank my guest, Liz Taylor. A reminder, David Litvin and Amelia Wright are back on the Tuesday edition of the Owl Pod with an all-new episode. I'll see you next Friday. As a reminder, if you want to support the Owl Pod, please be sure to subscribe, leave a rating. Most of all, please tell your friends. You can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can follow us on Instagram at the Owl Podcast. Special thanks to our Owl Pod team, Christy Bannon, Justin Miller, Prince Moody, and our executive producer, Dan Lopez. I'm Kevin Kopp. Thank you all so much for listening, everyone, and go Owls.